All right. Hello, everyone out there. How are you? Super excited to be with you today. We are live and broadcasting, and so I'm super glad you were able to join us for this LEAP Q&A. I'm here to answer questions. There's a lot of questions that have come in already, and of course, you know, if you want to send any questions, please do that. And also, we'll just keep letting you know, but there's an awesome new resource that we've put together. Really been wanting this for a long time, and we use the excuse and opportunity of this LEAP launch and LEAP product to create an Xtracycle forum. And so that we're going to show you real quick here is, well, I'll show this a couple times, but we got a little background noise. We're figuring things out here. And on my right here, my right-hand man, it might look like left to you, this is Evan. Hey, Evan. Evan is figured out. He's the Wizard of Oz for me here, helping me figure it out. So we're letting you know about the, great. This is just an example of where you can go. This is a really cool opportunity right now to become a founding contributor to the Xtracycle forum. It's brand new. And what we've discovered is no one of us is as smart as all of us. And I would love for you, as somebody who's passionate about this, who either has questions or who has answers, the forum is really going to be the place where we as a community develop our ability to support people who come after us, because there's just no end to the questions that people have, the curiosities. It's just, you know, the world of bicycles is so amazingly diverse, and there's just so many different kinds of bikes and geometries and stuff. So just want to, again, point your attention to the forum, xtracycle.happyfox.com/forum, F-O-R-U-M. And you can join in there. There's some cool pieces that we've loaded up there already that have to do with LEAP geometry. And anyway, we'll get started here with some of the questions that already came in. And of course, like I said, really want to encourage you to write in your questions, right? They can do that. Okay. So do we want to take off or down for a second here? Sure. Oops. All right, figuring this out. Okay, so just general questions just to kind of kick things off. Many people don't really know what is the LEAP. The Xtracycle LEAP, we actually did get a trademark on, so thanks to all of you who weighed in back with our wayward naming process, if you remember, a year ago. And so thankfully we can say Xtracycle LEAP without any question. And I think all around here we're really pretty thrilled about that. Now, what is this thing? So many of you know about the Xtracycle just as a broad concept of a full, like a cargo bike, you know, so this idea of a long tail cargo bike, which is something that I really did a lot of work on developing over the last 20 years and has become a mainstay now in the bike industry, right? We have, you know, manufacturers of all types all over the world making long tails. So we've really, as a community, achieved a huge success in the sense that we've kicked off a movement. And now this is kind of our chance to almost redesign ourselves, to kind of relaunch. And so the original bolt-on kit that we created was called the Free Radical. You might remember that. We sometimes call it the Free Rad, the original hitchless trailer and cargo conversion kit. You might remember we really talked about the sport utility bicycle. And over time, we've learned a lot of things. And so the LEAP is a redesign that really takes into account a lot of the feedback and things that we learned over time. And I'm really excited to kind of show you some of that stuff as we go. But in short, the LEAP is what you could think of as a hitchless trailer or a cargo bike conversion kit for the bike you have or a bike that you would love to get and convert. We have people doing both, and it's really optimized for that because of some of the main features, which is like kind of its adaptability. Just produced a video yesterday that's called LEAP Design Benefits, Xtracycle LEAP Design Benefits. You can look for that on YouTube. We might play it later if there's enough interest. And just so kind of getting you started. So did that answer the question of what is a LEAP? Just to make it really brief and clear, if you have a bike or you want to get a bike and you want to turn it into an Xtracycle or a long tail cargo bike, and this is your ticket. It's really versatile. It goes on lots of different types of bikes. We have a knowledge base and a sort of a what do we call it? The compatibility chart and guide that you can also check out to see Now I want to be clear, this first iteration, this first version that we're launching of the Leap will continue to evolve over time. This first one we are launching is disc brake only. So many people who have had this question of, can it work with cantilever brakes, or it definitely wouldn't work with cantilever brakes. Even the free radical wouldn't work with those, but with the proper sort of post-mounted or pivot mounts for V-brakes now, of course, would be the way we would call it. It doesn't have those posts. So just if you're curious, we've really emphasized disc, and there's a cool thing about this, which is different from the free rad. We ultimately evolved to a point where we could put disc brakes on the free radical, but it didn't work with anything other than a 203 millimeter rotor. And so now the Leap will also work with a 180, which is pretty optimized for 203 or 180. Is really good for a cargo bike. It gives you a good bit more stopping power. And of course, many of you know that disc brakes have the real shining point is when it's wet out. And what we notice about cargo bikes is people ride them year round. They ride in all sorts of conditions. And so that's an important feature that we wanted to make sure to do. But there have been some questions, when are we going to get to the point where we have that, V-brake pivot? And I can't say for sure. We have actually produced some models that were attempting to kind of make that convertible. One of my core values was to make this a product that would be future-proof to some degree. Now, of course, nobody can predict the future. I guess they say you can invent it. So, we're trying to figure out where we're headed. And of course, like I said before, the 29er didn't exist, the fat bike didn't exist, and the Leap is much better at adapting to all the different wheel sizes, although we haven't figured out a way yet, though I'm looking to our community to really help us figure out either how we hack the existing Leap, or what parts are available on the market that you could actually take a maybe more of what would be considered a proper fat bike, like a 4-inch wide tire, and fit it in there and deal with chain line and all that stuff. We haven't figured that out yet, but what we have done the most of is doing a 29x3, the 29 plus, and then we did the 650B plus as well. Those have worked well, although the challenge is, of course, always chain line. What you may or may not know, this is I'm just going to allow this webinar to really go into the depths of kind of Nerdville here, because this is the kind of the right forum to do it. But one of the things that we've discovered is that when a manufacturer makes a short bike and they have a fat tire on there, there's this geometry effect that supports having chain clearance because of the short distance that the chain has to bend around the tire, essentially. When you have a longer chain, your angle is essentially diminished as it goes back to your new rear wheel position. And so this is something that is just part of the work that we get to do, is figuring out how do we handle that. So we've done a bunch of stuff in the past where you move some of your smaller cogs inboard, so you kind of push your whole cog set sort of outbound, and that's been a really good solution for people. But I want to be clear that the Leap and the bolt-on in general is really kind of this DIY playground. It's really a place, or what we like to call DIT, do it together. It's our way of building community, building knowledge, and we're going to do a lot of learning as we open up this new platform, which, I want to be clear, I'll show later some close-up stuff of what we've done and how it works, but just suffice to say, there's a lot of learning still going on, and you guys are a big part of that. So went pretty long on what is the Leap, dove into some other questions sort of as a part of that, and there are more questions coming in as well. Let me ask Evan here. Evan, do you think I should jump over to some of the questions, or just keep going on this?
Do some of these, okay, and then let's go to these questions. Yeah.
Perfect, thanks. So there was a question about why disc brakes. I think I kind of touched upon that, but just to say, it's turns out when you have lots and lots of different wheel sizes and dimensions, it's hard to get tire clearance when you have posts in there. And we decided to launch this in the most adaptable version, so something that you would never be limited later on if you wanted to go ahead and put a 29 plus or go from 29 plus back down to a simple old school 26-inch mountain bike tire, 2.35 or something. You'd have that ability, and of course we're seeing more and more options in the department of well-built rear wheels that are disc compatible, and I think a lot of people aren't fully aware that those are out there. Anybody who finds them, will encourage you to post your finding to the forum, so people who want to buy a new rear wheel that's strong and affordable. You know, there's a lot of suppliers out there that are offering that, and that is going to be a really great way for people to take advantage, honestly, of the new and profound strength that the Leap brings to the cargo bike conversion arena. And really starting with a very strong wheel is going to be kind of a key point that you're wanting to consider. So to the question around brakes, basically, you're going to be well served to put a disc compatible wheel in there. Now, many people have asked about, can I change the wheel size? Can I, you know, basically have a bike that started with a 26-inch wheel set and make the rear wheel smaller or bigger or whatever? And the answer to that is we don't know. It certainly is possible. The wheel will fit in there. The questions really have to do with how will that affect the handling of the bike, the geometry. But again, this is our playground. The forum is going to be a great place to do some of that figuring and get people weighing in, and people say, hey, I did this conversion and it worked out great. I did this one, it kind of didn't work at all. This is the nature of the beast here, and we're really excited to share this journey with you guys. So as far as the question of, you know, when can we expect a solution, I don't know. What I've been humbled by in this process, many of you probably saw us show the Leap at Interbike in 2012, actually, so 4 years ago. And I had already been working on it for a year. You know, people like Brian Keener, you know, awesome inventor, bike maker in Tucson. You know, he and I got together almost 5 years ago now and started building this thing. And I had a lot of goals and ideas, and honestly been humbled in the process of what it takes to make a truly great product, make it in a way that I feel proud of, that we work in factories that, you know, are not abusive to the environment or to laborers. You know, a lot of, you know, one of the core things that was my goal was actually to have the price come down. And in some ways I was really frustrated along the way that it actually went up a little bit. And yet now I can, in all honesty, tell you those changes are absolutely worth it. You of course couldn't know until you get one in your hand. So that's kind of the catch-22 we have here. But when you feel this thing, when you see these parts, you just realize it is such a significant, you know, I'm trying to hesitate saying the Leap, but, you know, such a significant jump up in performance and strength, longevity, quality. It's on a new playing field. But again, people want to kind of compare the two, and so it's difficult. But I do actually have an original free radical frame here and a Leap frame. We can kind of, if you guys are curious, kind of see them side by side. You can see, you know, some of the radical changes that we've made along the way. But just that was a long way of saying I don't know when we're going to get it. We have some really cool ideas about how to do some convertible brake mounts, but honestly, you know, my experience so far has taught me it's probably 2 years away. So if you're excited about this and you want to do a conversion, I would just encourage you to kind of go to the path of either choosing a bike that already has disc brakes or getting a rear wheel, which we'll all have people weighing in on how to do that. All right, so big question that came up. We sort of, you know, I have to admit, we kind of poked the hornet's nest as we went to launch this thing. I was so excited. I tend to push the team here. Evan will tell you that we weren't exactly ready to kind of open this Pandora's box, and yet it's been an awesome process. And one of the things that we did is we reached out to, you know, Jeremy, our mechanic here, was saying, you know, 650B plus is a really cool tire size. Seems like lots of people are doing that. Let's see if we can figure that out. And one of my loves of this product has been, you know, it's seeing if it really works well with lots of different styles, geometries, wheel sizes, bike styles, you know, everything from cross bikes to, you know, like a hooligan style, you know, 20-inch adult bike, 20-inch wheel adult bike, to, you know, like we converted a Surly Krampus early on, the 29 plus. So a lot of learning still to do, but I will get to sort of a point where you can kind of plug in your geometries and understand. But I'm just going to kind of go through this. So basically, many questions came in because the first bike that we had that we put together that was sort of not a cargo node was the Marin Pine Mountain. We put that together, and you can see that on our homepage, and, you know, a lot of our videos we shot with that. Super fun bike, and yet you know, we learned some things from that, and we actually are continuing to tweak this at the sort of very, you know, to the degree I always want to make these final last-minute changes that drive our factories crazy, but I'm pushing really hard based upon feedback. So there may still be a chance based upon this call and everybody's feedback to kind of make a few minor tweaks before the product ships. So it's actually, you know, going into production. We had to place our order, you know, last, December was it, or November? When did we kind of first put in an order. Anyway, it takes a long time to kind of get everything going on our supplier side. But that's what it takes. That's where we're working through that system. So anyway, that is, so what does it take to make it level? We're figuring that out. What we do know, actually it was great. I went on to rideyourbike.com. You know, it's a site that's been up forever. Bike shop in Seattle put that up, and if you go there, rideyourbike.com/Xtracycle, you see tons and tons of pictures of bikes that have been converted. And what I found very interesting was seeing, you know, many of them, the deck tilted backwards, many of them it tilted forwards, meaning it, you know, sloped down to the front or back to the back. There were only a few of them that was actually level, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. We've already seen this with the free radical, and one of the things we've played with in the launch of the Leap was how much can we actually adjust the sort of leveling, and it turns out it's a fairly complex engineering challenge to allow for. So this is part of the learning we're doing, but I anticipate we'll, over the next couple of years, come up with some really clever ways, probably reverse compatible, you know, clamp systems that you guys will help us prototype and figure out that really work with a broad array so you can actually fine tune it. That was some of the ideas we originally did. And again, I don't know if any of you have done product development out there, but you start out with your wish list and it gets whittled back pretty heavily based upon what's, you know, possible and the engineering challenges. So anyway, that is where we're at with that. There was a question, is there sort of an ideal size wheel? And what I can say right now is not necessarily. We really, I'll get to sort of the, you know, the question around this at the sort of what I can help you figure this out. Henry Kellogg from Liontail did just an awesome job engineering and helping us figure out a calculator, and that's going to be up on our forum. So we'll show that in a minute here. So basically, there was a question. The image of the 650B conversion. So yeah, talked about that. Basically, because of that wheel size, because of that geometry, it tilted forward. We haven't had a chance to. We now have a calculator that will tell if your bike, you know, if we put the existing current one, you know, this basically pre-production sample that we have on your bike that you have, if you know some of the core metrics of that bike, we can tell you whether it'll tilt forward or back. Ultimately, we're going to use that data kind of, like I said, to fine tune and do this release of the first version. So to be honest, I don't have a way to guarantee, because we may actually tweak it. So right now, all I know is that if you put it, it tends to be that if you put it on a larger wheel size bike, it's going to lean forward a little bit, but that's a huge generality, and I can't really sort of guarantee that. But to be continued. We're doing a lot of learning about that right now. There's basically a question, a very legitimate question around the deck angling, and I'll be really clear. You know, we didn't have a hoopty early on. We didn't have a way for kids to hang on, and yet, you know, gazillions of parents, you know, over the years carried their kids on sloping decks forward and back, and kids are amazing in their ability to hold on. Luckily these days we have, you know, we've developed some new things. The hoopty gives that option, and so, you know, there's not a lot of sliding that's going to go on if the deck is tilted slightly forward. The other thing is that there's actually, one of the cool things about the Leap is it has a detachable tailpiece now, and that actually enables you to do some micro leveling, you know, of probably up to a centimeter of sort of fore and aft adjustment, which is actually pretty significant when you think about the angles differences. So if that's a core concern of yours, know that some of the new features of the Leap actually allow you to level the deck independent of your bicycle geometry. So something important to know. But yeah, there was a concern about people sliding, and I'd just be really clear that the angle of that is very, very minor. If they're sitting on a pad and able to hold on, there's no, I mean, you know, I've got my son on the back of my bike a lot, and, you know, I stop fast or whatever, I mean, he doesn't go sliding around because he's holding on, he's sitting on a pad that just kind of keeps his butt still. But this is all stuff we'll figure out, and you'll be able to help me see. If you're really concerned about it and you're not able to figure it out ahead of time, you know, I'd encourage you to wait. Don't, you can learn from your community, you can get really involved in the forum and just figure it out as we go. And so, you know, the last sort of question in this category was really about geometry and how, so this is kind of diving into the deep end of Nerdville here, but I've touched upon it a little bit. Essentially, for those of you who are in the know, this is an obvious question. For those of you who are new to bike geometry, I'm going to attempt to give you a really brief sort of introduction. So bike geometry, you know, has been evolving for over 100 years. You know, it really makes it, there's all this stuff about trail and fork angles and offsets and steering tube and head tube geometry. And what I can say is that again, still too early to know. What we've largely discovered with our complete bikes is that when you make the head tube angle get a little bit steeper, it tends to, just by probably a degree or something like that, again, depending on what your fork offset or rake is, it tends to have a positive impact on the handling. That in terms of its kind of quickness, or what you might call sort of a resistance, of the like wheel flop and other things like that, it's beneficial. That said, early on in our experiments with the radish, if those of you guys remember the radish, the first radish, we actually, I was pretty naive about geometries, I'll be honest. I didn't get into this, I was doing medical device design, so I was not I loved riding bikes, but I didn't know a lot about bike design, and I just set out to make something that would ride really well. And what we had discovered was this experience of the tail end, what I call the tail wagging the dog. So if you put weight at the very end of a long tail bike, it had a way of kind of steering the bike a little bit. And we wanted to kind of offset that. And we found that the best way to offset that was actually slacking the steering tube angle. So actually making it lean back a bit more. So what you discover is there's a huge array of bikes that will ride well, but if you get really into it under a microscope, you'll personally probably be able to discover what you like more or less. But it's really going to matter what bike you put it on. And we're going to have some resources for people to really understand that. And those of you who really care about it can contribute and be real providers of value to those who are just learning. So that's one of the great things about the forum. But just to kind of touch upon that, lastly, I wanted to just really, again, give a shout out to Henry, as well as Chris Nygaard in Seattle. They've just been a really great contributing force to our development effort. And between them, but particularly Henry Kellogg, thank you for helping develop the calculator. So here's the things that I want to ask you to do. So if you go to this, I'm going to give you again this link here real quick. It's this one, right? Loda. Okay, thanks. Display this. Okay, great. What I wanted to do was, again, give you this link. So go to Xtracycle.com. No, sorry. Go to xtracycle.happyfox.com/forum, FORUM. And you will see, or you can search for, or will readily see a place where we're talking about geometry. And what we're going to ask you to do, if you're able to, either now or later today or whenever you have a chance, write in with a couple things. Okay, so here's what would help us be able to help you potentially do some calculations of your geometry. And again, like I said, it will change over time. So you're going to want to, based upon the learning we do, we're going to use that data to kind of optimize our final geometry is in the short. So here's the things that would be really helpful. Please write the year and the make and the model of your bicycle that you're thinking about. And you can even do it for ones that you don't know about. If you have access to and are able to do a little bit of research about historical bikes, we found it difficult to find some of this data for bikes. So you might find a resource out there, and it'd be awesome if you would share that with us on the forum, become the founding member there. So year, make, and model. Chainstay length, so the distance between the center of your bottom bracket back to the center of your rear dropouts. The bottom bracket drop, or the BB drop. The BB drop is a metric, essentially, if you were to draw a horizontal line going through your two wheel axles, so the center point of your wheels, and then if that were sort of a horizontal line through space, and you measure the distance between that line and the center of your bottom bracket, that would be your BB drop. So we need that. It's a really critical measurement. It's probably one of the most critical ones. And of course, it's also helpful to know the wheelbase of your bike starting out. So meaning that, before conversion, we'd like to know the wheelbase, distance between the touch points on the ground of your two wheels. Head tube angle would just help us kind of know before and after, what it was before, what it is after. So if you can measure that, or you can look that up online, or from the manufacturer to find out what your bike head tube angle is. This is stuff, there's gazillions of bikes, gazillions of stuff. There's no way we could know all this, but we'll start through our forum to start to really build a resource base, so that people like Davey Oil don't have to memorize all these numbers. Okay, lastly, C-tube angle. That's just helpful if basically C-tube and head tube angle are linked. They're not gonna, change relative to each other through this conversion, but it'll give you a sense for, we can have some more knowledge-based articles about essentially what's positive about making your C-tube angle maybe change from being more slack to more vertical, or vice versa. All right, that was a deep dive on the leveling the deck. Should we wait? Oh, the link not working?
Yeah.
I'm gonna remove this here so we can move on.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll just slow down.
Okay, so there were some questions about. I'm open to Evan. Once you tell me to take some questions, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah,
but I'm gonna keep going.
start taking questions.
Okay, great. So this is the chat.
Yeah.
Or the room.
The chat.
Okay. All right. So we go.
You can start
the bottom or the top. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Great. Thanks for your feedback, Mark. Jesse, great question. We didn't even make an Xtracycle hat. You could have this one, but it's my last one. I seem to sweat through them, but we'll get that going. Oh yeah, you already replied to him, Kirk. Yeah, so definitely, like I think I might have mentioned, there are plans for rim brake compatibility, but it's a ways out depending on. Basically, I can say that we made a model that was rim brake compatible, had some convertibility to it, and it just simply didn't work. So unfortunately, I was depressed by that because it sort of set us back a year in our release timeline. Let's see. I'd like to see what the tadpole trike models have worked with the Leap. So yeah, great question, DJ. Essentially, we've got we have no data about tadpole trikes. We have some friends who have done some really cool conversions and who think a lot about tadpole trikes. It's one of the really exciting applications of the Leap for various reasons. And many people in the recumbent community have been long awaiting this because it really is going to change the game as far as making a recumbent trike. Yeah, I can't say enough about the benefits there in terms of comfort and aerodynamics, and it's just an incredible one of the really cool options. Like, what's the likelihood that a recumbent manufacturer is going to make a cargo bike? Pretty small opportunity, but there's a lot of a lot of recumbent tadpole or other types of trikes or other types of recumbent bikes that will be convertible with the Leap. Now, do we know how the geometry is going to be affected? That's back to that whole long conversation. So please go to the forum and get involved, and we'll see if we can use our calculator and figure out how to optimize for you about that. There is a question about drum brakes. In theory, drum brakes will work. How they attach is something that we, that's sort of the anchor arm, or how you anchor the piece there would be an important part of that. Let's see here. Will it be compatible with the free radical accessories? Great question, Jesse. So what I can say is that yes, the geometry, I mean the distance between the uprights is the same. You might find if you've taken it outside a lot, you might have to hack those things out, because we have, before people started using some inner tubes or whatchamacallers to kind of block water from going in, there's some galvanic corrosion that can happen. It can make it really difficult to get your racks out. So beware of that as a conversion question. But what I can say is that it will work if you were to just convert it over. And it's actually really become a very popular reason. People are loving that they can get the bare Leap option and take their old parts and convert it over. And with time, you might decide you want to go to a bigger wheel size. Well, your old racks, might be adaptable. There's some room for sort of elevating them and clamping them with the new rack locks that can hold a tube sort of a little bit out of the insertion tube. But again, that's in the realm of don't know about that yet. What we do know is they will fit, and we're going to be doing a lot of learning about all the various parts. One thing that we do have some knowledge base articles in our forum, not in the forum, but in our knowledge base, we have some articles about LT1, which is sort of basically back in all the free rad time. That was our original long tail technology standard. And then we did a redesign of that and launched it in 2015 that we call LT2. Generally, that's applied to it actually came out with our 2016 bikes, which launched middle of last year. So if you have questions about LT1, LT2, that is a core distinction between the old free radical and the Leap. There are some compatibilities, but it gets deep in a rabbit hole. I really encourage you to check out the resources there so you can actually know the true answers to that. You scrolled me up here, so
no, sorry.
do you want me to skip some or?
No.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so there's some, okay, let's see, come back down. Sorry, folks, I'm just figuring out this thing. Okay, we talked about that. Bruno. Okay, that's not, somehow Google doesn't seem to be working with the forum. Not sure what that means. Okay, well, there was a request, so I'm gonna go ahead and put it up here. The side-by-side comparison. So here we go, vintage free radical. Came off of my bike actually recently. Thanks, Evan. One thing I just want to point out, this is possibly one of the, I love minimalist design, so clearly this was about the the extreme end of minimalism. It had some downsides. There were people that, under extreme use or whatever, that this part broke off. I can guarantee that's not going to happen on the Leap. This piece, again, really flimsy, didn't really work very well if you had a funky, bike that either had wide chainstay spacing, or like when anyone wanted to put one on a 700C bike, they had to fabricate a little, what we call the FAP, this front attachment plate, was not wide enough, so they had to make their own. Some of that still may be necessary depending on what bike you have, but with especially these really fat tire bikes, they have just crazy spacing. So we're going to be doing some learning about that. But in particular, there was this point that was just I don't know, at the time it seemed acceptable to me, but where basically I can see it on this, you probably won't be able to see it, but there's actually an indent here where the little cross tube between my chain stays was a tube, and you'd sit this on there and clamp this on, and this is actually worn in there. So that, and we saw some ultimately would wear through or creak or whatever. This is just an example. This is an M6 bolt, kind of, you'll see it. It starts to feel a little flimsy when you look at the Leap. There's also this attachment bolt here. It was also an M6. This is the we call the French nut. And it was basically, I thought, a pretty clever system. It turns out it didn't work with a lot of bikes, like what we call Ritchie or Breezer style dropouts, depending on how your seat stays came down. Particularly newer aluminum bikes have these kind of funky enlarged seat stays that would not work with this. So a lot of people ended up being kind of rebuffed on their desire to convert their bike because there was just a real congestion point here. So there's a major redesign area. And probably the most significant thing, there's a couple, this in particular, you can actually, I don't know if you can see it. Can you guys see this one? Actually, I was babying. I learned early on that I could bend and break these things. So I babied this one, and yet it's still bending back. Well, that's just simply, as you'll see, this is a very thin wall, less than, I think there's a 1 millimeter wall thickness chromoly tubing, round 3/4 inch, right? So 20 millimeter tubing. You'll see we really upsized it on the Leap, and it just makes such a huge difference. The other thing, which is kind of cool, that I had no idea about early on, when I first designed this, you look at this, if you're sort of an engineer a bit like me, you'd see that this is a bit of a truss. We're kind of truss structuring this. But what we actually did is we disembodied the truss because we were connecting it here, but the dropouts are here. So it's kind of the twisting action was really the most notable problem that many people discovered, because it was not just purely being loaded vertically. Like when you ride it, it's a dynamic system, right? So you twist in the load, especially when you really loaded it up, or we found with the more petite riders, it made a bigger impact when they're loaded in the back, particularly multiple kids or kids sitting at the very back end of the bike. But also, the huge loads people were carrying, you've seen them online. There's just crazy stuff, straw bales and all sorts of stuff. That would cause a lot of twisting, but we had a couple of cases where there was enough torque there that it actually pulled these bolts out of the dropout. And the reason why is because it's really, really difficult to tighten them hard enough. And here's an example. So I can show you the two bolts side by side. So just kind of take a look here, and you can kind of see, back up, okay. Yeah, this is, I'm trying to figure out how to use this camera, right? So thanks for your patience, but just take a look. I haven't looked up the sort of specifics on terms of how hard you can torque this, but I guarantee you it's a major difference. And what we've noticed in our early tests, it just makes such a huge difference that that we can crank this down so hard. But you can also see one of the things. So this was a custom part that I designed. Again, kind of cool, the French nut. This is kind of like, if I thought that was cool, this is just the next level. This is our own custom tooled bolt, essentially. So, carriage bolts was the original idea, but carriage bolts, of course, if you're familiar with carriage bolts, they have a square kind of piece here. And if you get stuck in South America or something, and this is, gotten lost by some absurd, who knows reason why, you could swap it out with a 10 millimeter, or I think it's a 3/8 carriage bolt. But this right here actually fits perfectly into your dropout. See how it's rounded through that section. And then the other cool thing is you actually don't need to hold onto it with a wrench. So you can just put a huge socket wrench or whatever wrench you've got on this acorn nut, and you can just get this thing super tight, which makes a big difference in terms of just how the bike handles and how it flexes, and just that super positive engagement. You can see this spacer actually engages directly with the Leap frame. That's kind of cool. And then we've got a lock washer, and then of course this acorn nut, which is kind of great because if we didn't use an acorn nut, the end of this bolt would stick out, and it could kind of catch your Achilles tendon, or what do they call that, internal bone on your foot. Anyway, so that's just a great example of those things. Let's go back to some of our questions here. Oh wait, we're looking at these ones. Okay, thanks, Davey. It is. I'm really excited about that calculator. Interested in adjustment means for making it easier for kids to hold on. So, Mark, your question about yeah, I mean, in its essence, like I said, there's adjustability to the deck angle, and there was some concern from people about sliding their kids. Again, I would say even up to several degrees, it's not going to be noticed at all. But it's more visual. It's a visual piece. But once you start adding all the other parts, so all of our early, I don't know if you noticed, but most all the early pictures didn't have bags, didn't have a magic carpet, didn't have a hoopty on there. So you kind of didn't have any context. That's one of the challenging parts about our stuff, is that, absent the LT accessories, it's really difficult to kind of have context. And if you kind of developed your Xtracycle eyes, you can see that stuff a little easier. But there's just a ton of really cool adjustability built in. So I just want to really encourage you not to worry too much about that with the passengers. One of the things that we really pioneered was adult passengering, the free radical, when we were doing surfing on the back and carrying adults, and of course it really has become a dominant way to carry multiple kids, especially as they grow up and you want to bring their bike with you, and all sorts of stuff like that. That's one of our favorite uses these days. Of course, me with a 5-year-old, that's a big deal. But what we really want to be clear about this Leap is just the next level of just solidity, refinement, compatibility. It's just I don't know, I can't wait for you guys to have one, because it's just, when you see it, it's going to be awesome. So I don't know if we're getting some feedback about
that.
Yeah,
so just to clarify, the button didn't have a Y. Someone noticed it, and so if you just type it in now, anytime we show it, we can show it for you right now. Oh yeah, here, I'll put up. There was a. It now works. I apologize for not working before.
So we were rushing at the beginning of this, and I think we maybe put in the wrong, slightly inaccurate URL. But now, if you can see it up there, so if you were having trouble at the beginning, go ahead and feel free to click on this, and that'll take you into the forum. So I'm gonna just you can see it. It's xtracycle.happyfox. I think I somehow canceled that. So, all right, keep going here, and let's see here. All right, thanks you guys, Kirk, for weighing in. Thanks for your excitement. Yeah, lots of people have been looking forward to this. I think we've talked about the geometry, and yeah. So Aaron, good question about that. Again, get involved in the forum. There's going to be a lot of learning going on there, but particularly people who have worked on a lot of older bikes. This is going to be a great place, because it turns out the web is not terribly useful when it comes to telling what the actual bottom bracket drop is, and that turns out to be one of the more significant impacts on this. Well, it would have been true as well on the free radical, but we didn't know to ask that question. It's kind of cool. We've evolved as a cargo bike community. Let's see here. All right. Okay. Oh yeah. So there was a question that came in about dealers. How, if you're not kind of the DIY person, how do you do this? You don't want to be left out. You have a bike you'd love to convert, or you have a dream bike that you want to make, and do your, like we talk about the bucket list, kind of an image of something you want to do, but the bike for you doesn't exist out there, right? We have people who want to ride down the coast of Baja, carry their surfboard, and bring their dog, and the bike for that maybe doesn't exist right now, and so they're going to carry solar panels and electrify it. So how's that going to work? Well, again, back to the Xtracycle forum, great way to do that. But also for the mechanical side of actually making that conversion happen, I just really want to encourage you to go to our dealers. Currently we haven't built we have some need to update our dealer locator. That's in the works right now. So thank you all of you out there for your patience with our technical sort of hiccups. But we will have in the next month a link on our website on the dealer's locator for dealers that are specializing in supporting, carrying, and knowledgeable about the Leap. So you can really tap into them as a resource because they're going to be awesome. There's no question that if you don't have the technical ability or the leadership in bike field, it's really great to use that. And of course, all of you who out there who are dealers know that you don't need to be an Xtracycle full-blown dealer to get this. We have what we call parts only dealers, so feel free to sign up to become that if you are a legitimate bike shop, as well as all of our existing dealers get great margins on this. So feel free to reach out to us through the channels on our website if you're a dealer or you want to get this for a customer. And if you're a customer and you're wanting to get your dealer involved, you can point them in the direction of our dealer page so that they can get signed up and help you get your parts. All right. So that went out on the chat, but just want to let you guys know that we have some awesome distributors and more coming online as we go. But we have fantastic. Just big shout out to Luigi, who's who's running our distributor. He's the distributor for us in all of Europe. He's able to ship all over the place. He's been incredibly supportive. He was key guy behind the Cargo Node, which utilizes Leap technology. So he's in the know and a great resource for all of you in Europe. Also, just a big shout out as well to Rie, who's been our distributor, Motocross International in Japan. I have to say that actually my first exposure to somebody converting a bike with a 20-inch or smaller wheel was in Japan. Rie hosted us there, and we had a huge gathering of Longtail Friends meeting in Yoyogi Park in Kyoto. No, not Kyoto. Where was that? It was shoot, I'm gonna forget the name of that town. Sorry. Anyway, it was, gosh, that was almost 10 years ago. We had an awesome time, and we got a chance to see a bunch of the really incredible handy conversions, and it just turned me on to the, wow, this is Japanese people in particular were just really crafty and creative and making bikes of their own design, but we saw many of them were interested in using different wheel sizes, and I thought, okay, this is something I want to do, and it became a key part of this project. So there's a question from friend about no distribution in NA. I'm not sure what that is, but we definitely also are fulfilling lots of orders in Canada. So feel free to place your order, Xtracycle.com. We can ship now, I'm very excited to say, to Canada. Canada, we have not done the best job supporting you, and I apologize for that. That is all changing, and it's really something we're very excited about here to be able to support our northern neighbors better, because it's just been, frankly, a really excited, stalwart community of believers in the Xtracycle and Free Radical and even Edge Runners. So we just really looking forward to supporting the dealers there better and any customers. So we're still in the early days of that. So be patient, be kind, but help us figure out how to succeed in Canada, because we're really fired up about being able to serve you better. Okay, so I was going to talk a little bit about how the extension tube works, because there's sort of this question of the tongue. So I'll just read this question out. So it says, explain the extension tube and how it works. The tongue of the Leap that clamps onto the chainstays has some variability in length and slides in a tube attached. So I'm going to show you that, linked by a collar and basically clamping to the chainstays. So question about if my donor bike, or what we've been calling sort of the conversion bike, has extra long chainstays, what happens with that? And there's, he's talking about, a semi-recumbent and sort of the unique issues. So most people wouldn't need it that long. So we don't know right now. Honestly, this is where we're gonna figure out some stuff as far as how long this needs to be. I originally set up the length of this to be, pretty supportive of a very long chainstay. And we can also write this into the forum exactly how long this gets, because I don't have a tape measure right here. But let me just show you real quick. So let's hold this up right like that. Okay, so what you can see is, if you can see right here, this is, of course, what would be sort of the front bridge that we call. and then this is where your rear dropouts are bolting on. And so this is the part that is kind of traveling alongside parallel to your chainstays on your bike. It's dropped below the chainstays. It actually turns out to be a really great place to hold on. It's, you know, well hand sized, one of my favorite tricks. But a couple things to keep in mind. So I'm going to pull this apart here just so you can see. This is what we call the boom tube. So this tube right here extends. It's about, I forget, about 8 inches long, and it has a slit so you can clamp it. And then you can see this is our heavy duty safety clamp. I mean, I'm just like the number of custom machined, and this actually has an extrusion as well as a 3D machining process after the fact to make this thing just awesome. Part of the reason was this originally was going to use just a seat post clamp, but because of the forces that this sees that a normal seat post clamp wouldn't see, it actually broke the bolt on it. So we came up with this design, which has a really cool other feature in that, and we don't have the cable right now, but there's actually a little leash that kind of comes out of here using a brake cable and housing that goes around your frame. And if there were ever an instance where some part failed or some part of your bike broke, it will actually catch it and keep you from sort of your pedals from hitting the ground, I guess is the easiest way to say it. So I'm going to show you real quick how this works. So this just slides onto here. Of course, these two bolts tighten to crank this down, and then you can see there's a minimum insertion line on here. So it's it sticks into this a little bit, but I'll insert it that far, and we'll see. So this is quite long, like longer than any chainstay that I've measured so far. I gave it some extra room there. So some people will end up having to cut this down in order to slide it in far enough for their short chainstays. And you can see this again. Some of the tooling involved in this thing is just crazy. I mean, a lot of you are wondering, you maybe have a question, how did the price go up? And again, I'm just hoping you'll see this in the quality of these parts and the engineering and the effort that went into them. It's just a next level of sophistication, but it's also added some cost, and I feel like it's absolutely worth it. When you see the comparison, you just think, wow, this is totally worth it. But this in particular is a new manufacturing methodology for me called 3D forging. And so in order to make this as strong as it possibly could be, we didn't want to have a weld in here. That would have been cheaper to do, less tooling, but we just wanted to be absolutely certain that this critical joint here where the front clamp is attaching, there's just no chance that with aluminum, as you probably know, if you introduce welding, it has a lot of heat affected area and can change the metallurgy and sort of end up with a potential failure or crack. And so this being 3D forged just is like the most strong way that you can kind of create that. And then just so you can kind of see, I don't have it assembled here, but this is essentially how the clamp works. So we've got, you can see how this bolt right here, this one going through, passes through this hole, okay? Now, technically, you could mount this so that it sits on top of the, basic clamps onto your chainstays, and then it mounts below. That's what it's designed to do, is actually hang. So putting this bolt in tension, you can see how much bigger this bolt is than the bolt that we were originally attaching, with. And so what that does, it gives you a tremendous amount of, adjustability. You can really clamp well and securely, and then it'll perfectly match the angle that happens to be on your bike as far as the difference between the chainstays and the bottom bracket. These clamps, these are stamped out of metal. Again, a really expensive and awesome tooling experience and process. But they're also, this one we actually hacked. So we talk about hackability. This one we took the grinder and just ground it out because it turned out that the geometry on that Pine Mountain, the seat tube came really close here, and we ended up having to cut down the bolt and change out some parts in order to make it work. So that may have to happen for your bike. Other bikes, you might need to put in a little piece in here that bridges a little bit so that it gets wider than this current setup. So there's going to be a lot of variability, but one of the coolest things about this is just one wrench, will tighten these bolts as well as the attachment bolts that I showed you earlier at the dropouts, and just, super, super high torqueability, probably possible to over torque it and crush your chainstays, so beware of that. But just incredible number of precision parts built into this that, all stainless hardware, this Nylock basically gives you just the most optimal way to kind of hold this thing all in place, so no rattling will cause it to loosen over time. So just a deep dive into the attachment system. Again, hit me with any questions you have about that. Hope that was really clear for people. Oh, I haven't also, I'm really proud of this. So this, we've talked a little bit about this, this chain roller here. So first for us, so basically custom tooled. This is a high durometer rubber that basically, you know, we've run it on a chain on here. You can't really, it just, you know, you see the little grease on there. This rolls, you know, so you can run the chain up and over, and it lets, there's some really cool things that enables you to do that we won't go into right now. But in particular, one of the things that happens when you use a roller is that you can, what we've learned about with longtails, that the rear derailleur, often the spring in it, on the older ones in particularly, are not a really high-end derailleur, didn't have enough ability to really handle the extra length and weight of a long chain. And so this really helps with that. It helps with what they call a chain slap. So when the chain would kind of, you know, bounce as you hit a bump or whatever. So particularly important off-road, but still, you know, in cities and potholes and stuff, that could still happen a little bit. It could nick the paint, or just, you know, just kind of a little bit unaesthetic. I was, you know, the classic minimalist and said, not a big deal, but we realized with the Leap, we're going to do this right. And so a bunch of, again, you know, custom tooled parts to make this work really well for you. 2 sealed bearings in there, just spins like a dream. So really quiet and optimized, keeps the chain right in there. That's a highly recommended part for you to put on there. So excited about the chain roller. Okay, so there may be some more questions here. Let me see. Yeah, there's a contribution that, you know, that some of the new derailleurs have clutches which help with the chain slap. So you may not need the chain roller. You might just appreciate the aesthetic quality. It also helps with different geometries, and when you have the kickback on there, the new kickback, brought in here to show you. Put that over here. Many of you haven't seen the new kickback that we developed as part of the LT2. This is again just a marvel of, you know, tooling and sophistication. What do you call it? The spring is actually inside of this. So if those of you who have the old style kickback, there was a spring that failed. That was probably the part of that thing that failed the most often. And so now this has an internal spring, and it also flips up. Really, it's narrower, and it's sort of how it mounts, so it doesn't require you have the pivot post that used to. If you remember, the LT1 kickback you had to insert a little tube into the side, and this one you just bolt it on, and so it leaves you. You know, many people had sort of the challenge. You get used to it, you know, and stop, but that kind of painful thing where you would kick off and your Achilles tendon would hit the post that was holding your kickback on. So again, you know, I will be honest, it was hard to really improve upon the Free Rad. It was a great design, but spending as much time and money as we have on the Leap, I'm really proud of the things we've come up with. They do make a significant difference. Although I will never say, you know, the Free Rad is awesome, and those of you who have it, I absolutely love that design. So that's the kickback. Also adjustable, and, you know, height and adjustability there, like the original was. Okay, that's the kickback, the second kickback. Okay, so oh yeah, there was a question basically about the Bionics. So Bionics, if you don't know, is a maker actually based in Canada. We've done a lot of work with them. They do pretty much one of the top conversion kits for electric. And so yes, the question was, will the Bionics work with the Leap? And emphatically the answer is yes. To my knowledge, their wheel is, you know, meant to work with the 135 millimeter overlock nut dimension. So it will fit in there. The D500 series motor, those of you might have heard, is the more recent, more powerful motor that they've done. Similarly follows that. We haven't used that much in the past because it doesn't work with a 20-inch wheel, and of course the Edge Runner has a 20-inch rear wheel. We've also moved on to the reliability and the power of the mid motor, and really loving the Bosch system. But if you know, there's no way to use the Bosch system with an existing bike. And so you're going to be in the land of conversions, and there's just a tremendous number of options of quality stuff. You know, Lion Tail is going to be, you know, supporting you with that, ebikes.ca and the team there, Justin and Robbie, like just great support out there for electric. One of my greatest excitements about this project is that what we learned, and many of you out there probably have experience with this, when you electrify a free rad Xtracycle, so a bike that's been extended with the free rad, it just turned out to be much noodlier than most of us would want, especially when you got into the bigger motors and batteries. The Bionics was pretty reasonable. A lot of people found it, you know, it wasn't too much, but in general, it would just, you know, beat the thing up. The frame was not really designed to handle the kind of loads that people carry when they're assisted, and the amount of distances they were traveling, the amount of time. So this is just a huge step forward in the realm of electrification. The other side of this that I'm really excited about is that there are a tremendous number of electric bikes out there that honestly don't get ridden very much, and people are looking to get rid of. And the reason why, in my sort of maybe, you know, somewhat my opinion, is that they got the bike, but they couldn't do much with it. And in order to have an electric bike really be something you use day to day, and this is not everybody, but by and large, once you have an electric bike, you are just much less inhibited from doing trips that you would have driven for. And yet, what we of course all know is that Xtracycles are like having a back seat and a trunk for your bike, and being able to convert your bike so that it has a back seat and a trunk is a huge step forward. Being able to electrify it is also a great option, and there's more and more great options for that. You know, electric cycles or the E-Rad is a great solution. There's just going to be a tremendous number of options for this community to try out. We're going to teach each other. There's going to be some great discussions on Endless Sphere. If you're familiar with that resource, again, based out of Vancouver, the team there just really generous and capable, and just an incredible community. I hope that our forum is one day as robust and just helpful and knowledgeable and such an incredible resource to the world that theirs is. But it's also a great resource for people who are looking to answer questions, or ask questions and answer questions about electrification. So we had a question come in the other day about mounting 2 all-cell batteries. Well, you know, we haven't done that yet. We don't know. We've messed around with all-cell batteries. You know, the early ones didn't have an enclosure. Michael Bach, what I like to call our chief electron officer, for years has been modifying bikes. In fact, he was the first person to kind of really turn me on to the electric conversion after I had kind of a pretty lame experience early on with like a Zap motor kit. And he was working with Charlie Cunningham, who's, you know, famous for his role and some really critical innovations in mountain bikes, and, you know, closeness to Mount Tam and all the early mountain bike people. Well, those guys got together and we're trying to make the free rad, you know, again, the original frame that I was showing you is fairly lightweight. How do you weld on stuff? How do you make it stronger? You know, Val Kleitz, awesome. You know, big shout out to Val, rest in peace, Val. He was such a great believer in the free rad, did a bunch of great innovations, shared those with the world. He created the rolling jackass kickstand. If you've heard of that, you can look it up. It's just a great design, another option out there for people. And basically what we learned is that, you know, the free rad as it was, you could fix one part, but it would sort of translate into another place. And ultimately I was replacing everything, and I realized that I just needed to redesign the thing. And so again, thanks to all of you who've been patient over the years, you know, giving ideas and feedback. And we finally have really built those into an incredible new offering here. But again, you know, the ability to have this thing be able to withstand the loads, Michael Bach and Charlie Cunningham were trying to do that, and it really became quite a project. So the Leap is just an exciting takeoff point now as again a platform that I like to call, you know, this sort of hackability scale is just quite high, and we're going to learn so much from you. I mean, one of the things that we haven't talked much about here, but can I see the frame? Is you know, just as a totally different from the free rad land, you can see this is the tailpiece. So, you know, we never had a removable tailpiece on the free radical. We have it on the Edge Runner, if you're familiar with Edge Runner frames. What it does is it allows this really incredible degree of fine tuning or adjustment, because when you do the welding, you know, many of you who've done fabrication realize that welds want to move and you have to align after the fact. Well, it turns out with the Leap, the frame is so strong that you literally cannot bend it back into shape. So when you weld it, it's almost impossible to get it realigned unless you just get lucky. And so in manufacturing, we of course can't rely on getting lucky, and we had to take on this new challenge of making this tail end adjustable. But again, it's the reason why, and I can kind of show you from the side here. You know, there's the bolts holding it on. You can kind of tilt this a little bit to adjust for that deck angle that we were talking about earlier. It's also one of the things I'm excited about is this, you know, over time we'll develop some new accessories where you can just take this off and bolt it on, or you yourself could, you know, weld something onto it. Like a really popular thing we've done, you know, is we helped Brad Lancaster in Tucson, you know, weld on like an old hub so he could trail a bike behind him. That was one of his favorite uses of his Xtracycle. So there's a whole piece there that we can really work with. But I started talking about this, oh yeah, about hackability. So one of the things that we haven't tried yet, but I just wanted to give a word on is you can see here that these two plates, basically these two sit inside. And one thought I had is it may be possible if you have a wider dropout like OLD that you want to basically put in, like some of the newer hubs are much wider for fat bikes or for through axles or even e-bikes. There's a lot of variability there that didn't exist a long time ago. We haven't perfected this, but I just want to invite you, those of you who are tinkerers and on the adventurous side and also wanting to contribute to the forum, weigh in on as you get yours. You know, I can show you right now because it's all bolted together, but you could actually open this thing up. What does that do to the geometry? I don't know, but my hunch is that we can actually modify this and have that become one of the aspects to create various new versions of cargo bike conversion. So wanted to show that to you guys as well. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, so there's some more questions about fat bikes. Basically, at this point, the fat bikes that we're working with are the kind of the plus sizes. So the 650B plus, which is basically the 3-inch wide tires. There's a lot of question. I don't know right now. Early on, we tried to see if we could figure out a way to deal with, you know, the really big offsets and the kind of, you know, chain line ends up being the biggest issue broadly. I think we'll be able to figure out some solutions, but at this point, I can only say that we've used it with a 29 plus and a 650B plus, which in my experience is just a fantastic balancing act. I think when you get really, really wide, just a bunch of other things get a little haywire. And when you're carrying a lot of load, it's just kind of nice to keep those trimmed in. But we'll learn, we'll see. You know, maybe a 4- and 5-inch wide tire is really gonna be a game changer for folks. So again, go to the forum, weigh in, help each other figure that out. I know there's a lot of people thinking about that out there, and it is a really fun thing. I mean, just like electric, converting a fat bike is one of my favorite uses of the Leap because there're just not a lot of fat bike options out there. But, you know, I always like to say, you know, electric and cargo are like chocolate and peanut butter, and, you know, fat bike and cargo bike are probably like, you know, peanut butter and jelly. They do really go well together. So anyway, it'll be fun to figure that out. So yes, so there's a question about material. So everybody's probably pretty clear that we've made the Leap out of steel. That hasn't been probably a big question for folks. The question about material is we used high-10 steel, and so many people feel like, you know, broadly speaking in the bike industry, bikes that are made out of high-10 steel are considered really cheap, and kind of like Walmart bikes tend to use that because you save, I mean, honestly, you save, you know, pennies or dollar, you know, $1 or something when you make a bike out of high-10 steel. It's these days the difference in price for, you know, chromoly versus high-10 is not really big. The big cost is actually on the assembly or manufacturing side because so few people are actually working with steel, and we love steel here. Steel is real, steel is fixable. You know, it's something that very much easy to kind of, you don't have to heat treat, you know, if you're going to want to weld on, like, you know, people out there. In fact, the Riding the Spine guys, you know, we sent them an early sample of, you know, this making the heavy duty version of the Free Radical, and, you know, it had disc brake only, and they had reasons for wanting to use B brakes. And so they just welded them on, and that was great. That was good for them. I think it turned out that for them, it was easier to get replacement brake pads in South America or something, you know. So lots and lots of ways you can take this, but working with the steel, actually, that was really a derivative of the FEA. So as I talked a little bit about in one of the webinars last year, we had the experience of Ernest McCrank in Vancouver helping us out with some FEA analysis. So FEA stands for finite element analysis. And when I was in engineering school, it was something that was a particularly unique and highly skilled. You needed to almost be a PhD to be able to do it. These days, you know, our software and computing power is so great that we actually have been able to, you know, lots of software programs actually have FEA analysis or FEA built into them. And so Ernest, you know, volunteered and helped us out really generously early on. And when we ran those analyses, we found that the high 10 or the mild steel composition, you know, you basically program it in with the material qualities, and we found that it actually withstood. It had the, you know, basically when you look at a heat map, and we can post some of these to the forum, when you look at the heat map of sort of areas that are going to be most likely to fail or bend or get fatigued and break when you're doing this modeling, comparing the, you know, the equivalent strength or sort of, you know, the same wall thickness, you know, strength comparison between mild steel and chromoly, it actually was superior on the mild steel or the high 10 side. And for me, that was obviously sufficient. Our top goal in this thing was to make it really strong. I like that it's obviously easier to work with if you do need to get it fixed or sometime later. You know, it's much more friendly to lots of different types of welding, from stick welding to MIG welding to TIG welding. So, you know, I mean, it's that's one of our core values, is something. This is a really kind of, this first version is very much built for adventure and for people who want to hack it. And so there was no better material choice. And part of that has to do with the wall thickness. So when you make, you know, where you get your so if you were to worry about weight, you know, that, which again, in a cargo bike, it turns out is a little bit crazy. Actually, we did weigh it the other day. And so for those of you out there who are curious, the old free rad frame, it's a little bit not apples to apples, because the LT2 system has, the deck is about a pound lighter than the previous deck, or even actually even less than the original wood decks. But we, you know, so essentially you could say, if you were to kind of compare the two, the frame is about twice the weight of the free radical frame, so about 5 pounds heavier. And you know, when you look at that, you know, in the scheme of things, like if you carry 200 pounds with a sufficiently strong wheel, I would feel comfortable carrying 200 pounds more maybe on this than I would have on my free rad frame. You know, the trade-off there, right? It's kind of like the ant size load. You know, it's so strong relative to what it can do, and that's really what's going on with the wall thickness and with the strength and with this robustness, or the essentially what we call toughness of the material, and its resistance. So the chromoly tends to be a bit more prone to cracking, a little bit less ductile. And so again, you know, that's what we're working with on this one. And there's been a lot of questions about that. So I hope that answered your questions. Feel free to write in some more, and I'll do my best to answer it. Many of you out there probably are more knowledgeable than I am about material properties. And so would love for you, again, go to the forum. I'll put that link up again if we're good. People know where the forum is. Great. Thanks, Evan. So, okay, great. So let's see. Were there any other that I missed? Oh, great. Yeah. So Davey from G&O Family Cyclery in Seattle. Big shout out to Davey. He's been, he jokes about being longtailcompatibility.com, and which doesn't exist, by the way, but maybe he's bought that URL by now. It's certainly the equivalent of that is going to be at xtracycle.happyfox.com/forum. But he was basically saying that they've done a lot of trailer hitch conversions to the tailpiece, which is just nice. If you want to, basically, you can pop that piece off, and you know, people hopefully will weigh in on the forum and say, hey, I'm a welder, I figured it out, I've got the jigs, and you could just literally pop that tailpiece off and mail it to that person, and you know, you don't have to repaint your whole thing, you don't have to worry about heat affected zones, you don't have to worry about shipping this big bulky package. So so you know, just keep in mind that that's a you know, a good option is modifying that tailpiece. So the tailpiece is steel. Just to be clear on that one, it's made out of the same material as the rest of it. You know, again, big shout out to Val Kleitz for his pioneering efforts. Okay, a couple more questions here. Feel free to keep writing in. This is going long, but you know, this is what it's for. So those of you who have, you know, hung in there, kudos to you. There's a lot of information here, and I couldn't figure out a better way to present this to you than to just tell you. But again, like I said, the next step is going to be really using the forum. So please plug in there. There's a question here. I think I answered it earlier, but essentially, there's been a lot of interest because of the Edge Runner and our efforts there. You know, again, shout out to Sam Whittingham in creating the Mule, and we created the Edge Runner after that. You know, of course, my very first full frame, the very first bike that I built as a longtail in Nicaragua actually had a rear 20-inch rear wheel, and actually had square rectangular tubing, actually the same dimension as the Leap. So kind of a lot of throwbacks going on here. But the question was, can I use the Leap and basically change my rear wheel size to drop that deck height and get some more of the beneficial properties? This is an area where, again, the forum is going to be really useful as people tinker with that. Right now, I can say that going down in the wheel size is just going to affect other things. It's going to affect your deck angle. It's going to affect your geometry. Almost impossible for me to say your particular scenario. We're just going to have to learn from each other. I'm sure we'll end up creating a really great knowledge-based article about how to do this for people who are interested. But right now, you're on that cutting edge, the pioneering, edge-running front edge of this development. And so I don't know the answer entirely. Yeah, so there's, yeah, people are, I mean, one of my favorite uses of Xtracycle is bringing pets with you. And, you know, of course, you've all probably know that the sidecar works with the Leap, but I'll shout that out again. But also, you know, if you want to be able to carry some big stuff on there, bringing that deck height down can probably help. So again, one of the cool things that I might not have said earlier, but the deck, the racks, they are an LT2 rack. They've been an improved design in various ways. They actually have bosses now. I can show you here. So these bosses here, oops, like water bottle size bosses, there's 3 of them on each rack. And so what that enables you to do, of course, is modify it in lots of fun ways, but also we'll be making available a pannier rail that you can bolt on. So in the past, you used to have to buy special racks if you wanted to do panniers, and those were quite expensive because they had to be welded. Now we can just bolt it on there. So if that's something you're interested in, that really plays in well to those of you who have panniers that want to carry them. That's something that's new and awesome about the new racks, the LT2 racks. The other thing is all of the racks will come with a marker on there. So they'll actually, these ones are not final production, but there'll be a little cut line. So if you wanted to cut the racks down and make sure that they, you know, stayed parallel, you could actually, you know, where it dropped in evenly, cut it on a line, and there's a line on there. They come sized for 29er with a fender, so they're actually quite high. All the racks that everybody gets will come with the long size, which is a little bit more expensive for us, but we wanted to give people the option. They can kind of make it exactly like they want, so we're giving you the full length of these racks, and then you can cut them down exactly like you like. If for some reason you know, work it out and you want to put it on a, you know, a smaller wheel size bike, like a 26-inch wheel bike, you get it down there, and then later on you decide you want to put it on a bike with a larger wheel size, you can always buy some more racks, you know, or maybe get a welder to, you know, re-weld that piece on for you. But the bottom line is, you know, this is a really modular system, and you can really think about this investment in the Leap as a lifelong investment. As we've learned, is that, you know, longtail bikes grow with you over time, is the way we say it. It's sort of a funny thing to say, but they can adapt. All the LT system, while it adds some complexity and sort of cost up front, you're buying sort of this future-proof aspect. Like all of you who bought into the FreeRad, now being able to port over your stuff onto the Leap and have the advantage of the upgrade. It's kind of like, I don't know what a good metaphor would be, but you know, how cool would it be if, like, you know, Boeing made an airplane and they could take all the parts out and you reuse the seats and, you know, get this sort of upgraded airplane. Like, it doesn't happen very much out there, and it's something that we've really spent a lot of time and effort and engineering and design effort into to try to keep the breadth of function, the usability really broad and capable for you, no matter what your dream is, whatever you want to build. That's been our, you know, pursuit. And again, those of you who are inclined to contribute to the forum are going to keep adding to our knowledge base. So again, the new LT system and the racks really offering you more options there. There was a question about compatibility about the Pocket Bike Friday. I personally don't know that bike. I don't know its actual dimensions, but we do have the compatibility guide. I encourage you to download that from our website, xtracycle.com/leap. It's probably also up on the knowledge base. So just look for Xtracycle compatibility guide. Google will probably get you there faster than I can. And again, great thing to ask questions. There's going to be a lot of discussion early on about bikes that are compatible. Like I offered earlier, please, send it in. We want to know the year, make, and model of your bike, the bottom bracket drop, the chainstay length, the wheelbase, the head tube angle, and the seat tube angle. And that'll start to be the kind of information that will set you up to know how this will convert. It's a deepening of our knowledge base. Again, just to underscore, totally supporting dealers, bike shops out there. I mean, you don't have to be a bike shop. Maybe you're, I don't know what other types of shops would be compatible and have the knowledge, but we created the Leap as a big part of a core return to our desire to get more people onto cargo bikes and riding the longtail lifestyle. And so knowing that many people out there don't have a chain breaker or don't know how to readjust a derailleur, it's incredible. I mean, just a huge shout out to the shops out there that are servicing people. It's a largely thankless job, I find, because people tend to think bikes are simple, and they're just not. They're very, very complex, and they keep changing all the time, and shops work super hard to make your bike work for you. And those of you who are mechanics yourselves, one of our dreams with this is that you would become part of the cargo conversion crew, or CORE, C-O-R-P-S. That is our dream of really having people out there that get these and help assemble them on all the bikes in their neighborhood. And we're going to have some really cool opportunities to support you in doing that. If that's your dream, it's a really, really core part of why I started Xtracycle. The social value and mission that we have here is to serve people and touch as many people as possible. And a big part of that is the knowledge that enables you to do that. So if you're not owning a bike shop, but you have the ability to support your community or your neighbors, if you want to go in and volunteer at your local bike kitchen, incredible development since I first started Xtracycle. There was no such thing as a bike kitchen, maybe there's one, I don't know. It was very rare at that time, and it's just been incredible, the development of this resource, this community resource, and the people who do that, just huge hearts and devotion to help more people get their bikes fixed, learn how to build them. So it's just a great way if you want to get one of these and bring it in, or if you have a bike kitchen and you want to set yourself up as a dealer or a parts dealer, please do. It's a big part of what we want to do. Long term, we're really looking forward to partnering with our nonprofit World Bike and finding ways to do granting. We're not there yet, we're not able to buy enough of these yet to really do that part, but just so you know, it's a big part of my vision for this product is actually kind of, if you've heard of Tom's Shoes, to sort of give one, get one. My goal is that by making a quality product and making it something that people here who can afford it will buy, and that'll enable us to give grants, and not necessarily always around the world. It could be people all over that have need and aren't able to afford it. So if you do have the good fortune, to be in the position to have bikes and know how to work on them and be able to do this, I'm so grateful for you. And also we look forward to really being able to reach out and support more people.
Two questions that aren't popping up.
Okay,
one is belt drive, and the other is leap on the net dryer.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. So 2 questions. I don't know if you could hear those. Evan was shouting out they weren't coming in through our chat panel. Belt drive, it's actually, that's a great question. I meant to mention that earlier. Belt drives are a unique beast unto themselves. And those of you who have played around with them realize that there's somewhat limited supply of, Gates type or sort of self-centering, I guess that's how you would call it. You guys probably know better than me. Belts, that there aren't as many of them made specific for bikes out there that are long enough to work on a long tail. So that's sort of a caveat. That said, there are gazillions of belt dimensions out there, made for all sorts of machinery and other stuff that also work. They just need kind of some, modification or ways to kind of keep them in place. And that is one of the really cool things that we have not yet played with, but I'm personally excited about, with the roller being able to run the belt up and over that front cross tube that I showed you. You can actually now work with a belt in theory. So great question, whoever asked that. You are on the cutting edge. Please help us figure out, add your thoughts and experiments and photos and research to our forum. But that is one of the cool things. So thanks for asking that question. The other question was about, will the Leap work on an edge runner? I have no idea. I think it would take some pretty crazy modifications to make it make sense, but I'll leave it up to you guys out there to figure it out. And if it does make sense, what I will say is early on we did some conversions of tandems, and the free ride just honestly wasn't quite up to the task. It just, the stresses on a tandem are just quite a bit more significant than a regular bike. I haven't tested it yet with the Leap, but just based upon my early experience, it's actually going to be a pretty cool thing. So if you have a vision of getting your entire family of 5 on one bike, this may be your chance. So again, go to the forum, weigh in, dream up your dream. The Leap is really, it's just a cool new opportunity, and I'm just thankful to all of you who have been weighing in. I'm going to wrap up pretty soon. There are we definitely, Japan, excited about you guys getting on there. Check out Motocross International New Zealand. We don't yet have any distribution in New Zealand, so hopefully you have a friend in the US that can buy you one or fly it over to you. Lastly, yeah, basically, I think, just to bring you back to this, or to bring it home, the forum, xtracycle.happyfox.com/forum, is going to be your friend. Please use it. Please join in. Ask your questions. Answer other people's questions. Xtracycle is all about innovation and community and transformation. And clearly, as you can see, Leap is just the center point of those 3 things. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. If you made it this far, you are a hero. You have the strength of giants, and I appreciate your contributions and your patience. And again, looking forward to building a great future with you. Thanks so much.